The last sliver of sun was dipping below the sprawling Phoenix skyline, painting my sterile, beige apartment in shades of orange and regret. It was a Tuesday. I remember because the trash bins were out on the curb, a weekly monument to the mundane rhythm of my life. I was curled on my couch, a half-finished cup of tea going cold on the coaster, scrolling through a social media feed that was a highlight reel of other people's adventures, engagements, promotions, backpacking through Southeast Asia. My own life felt like a book with very few chapters, and most of them were about getting my business administration degree and landing a stable, sensible job at a local logistics firm. My phone buzzed, skittering across the glass coffee table. The screen lit up with the name, Mark. A smile touched my lips, automatic and genuine. Mark had been my anchor for the past 3 years. We'd met in a college statistics class, 2 islands of quiet focus in a sea of chaos. He was an engineer, brilliant and steady. His world was built on logic, predictability, and 5-year plans. Our relationship was the same, comfortable, safe, and mapped out with the precision of one of his architectural schematics. We'd get married in 2 years, buy a house in a good school district, have 2.4 children, and take an annual vacation to somewhere with reliable weather. I loved him, I truly did, but sometimes, in the quiet moments like this, the safety felt a little bit like a cage. "Hey, you," I answered, tucking my feet underneath me. "Hey, Sarah, what are you up to?" His voice was warm, familiar. "Oh, you know, just watching the world turn without me." I tried to keep my tone light, but he knew me too well. "That bad, huh? Rough day at the office?" "Not rough, just beige, like this apartment, like my soul might be turning beige." He chuckled. "I have a cure for beige. I'm coming over. I need to talk to you about something." There was a strange undercurrent in his voice, a flicker of something that wasn't his usual calm assurance. It was a mix of excitement and nervousness. My mind, ever the predictable companion, immediately jumped to the obvious. The ring. He was going to propose. My heart did a little stutter step, a confusing cocktail of joy and panic. This was it, the next logical step, the moment every girl is supposed to dream of. "Okay," I said, my voice suddenly small. "I'll be here." I spent the next 40 minutes in a frenzy of low-grade anxiety, straightening pillows that were already straight, wiping down spotless counters, and checking my reflection in the microwave door. This was momentous. This was life-changing. Why did I feel like I was preparing for a final exam I hadn't studied for? When the doorbell rang, I took a deep, steadying breath. I opened the door, and there he was. Mark. His dark hair was slightly messy, as if he'd been running his hands through it. He was wearing his standard after-work uniform, a soft polo shirt and jeans, but his eyes were alight with an intensity I rarely saw. He didn't have flowers. He didn't get down on one knee. He just stepped inside, pulled me into a quick, hard hug, and then held me at arm's length. "Sarah," he began, his gaze serious. "We've been talking a lot lately about beige. About feeling stuck." I nodded, my throat tight. This wasn't the proposal speech I'd imagined. And we've always talked about the future. Our plan, the house, the kids, all of it. Another nod. I was a bobblehead of agreement, too nervous to speak. He took another deep breath, his hands still on my shoulders. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. And I've come up with a new plan. A different one." My mind was racing. Was he breaking up with me? Was all this stability an illusion? A different plan. Yeah. He looked directly into my eyes, his own blazing with a conviction that was both thrilling and terrifying. "Sarah, what if we sold everything? My condo, your car, most of our stuff. What if we pooled our savings, bought a sailboat, and just left?" The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't the silence of romantic anticipation, it was the silence of a vacuum, of all the air and sound being sucked out of the room. I could hear the hum of my refrigerator, the distant whoosh of traffic, the frantic thumping of my own heart. I stared at him. I must have misheard. "Left," I finally managed to whisper. "Left for where?" "Anywhere. Everywhere." We sailed down the coast of Mexico, through the Panama Canal, into the Caribbean. We cross the Atlantic. We see Europe, the Mediterranean, Africa. We just go. For a year, maybe 2, however long it takes. I pulled away from him, taking a stumbling step back until my calves hit the edge of the couch. A sailboat. The word felt foreign and ridiculous on my tongue. "Mark, we don't know how to sail. You get seasick on the ferry to Catalina. I like hot showers and reliable Wi-Fi." He was ready for this. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment idea, it was a fully formed manifesto. "We can learn. There are courses. We can get certified in a few months. We'll buy a sturdy, blue water boat, something safe and simple. We'll learn navigation, weather patterns, diesel engine repair. We'll do it together. He started pacing my small living room, his energy filling the space. Don't you see, Sarah? This is the antidote to beige. This is living, not this. He gestured around my tidy apartment, this waiting room for life. We're 26 years old. This is the time. Before mortgages, before kids, before it all gets too complicated. My logical mind, the part of me that had gotten straight A's and a 401k, was screaming a list of objections. It was financially irresponsible. It was dangerous. It was the opposite of our 5-year plan. It was, by every metric I had ever lived by, insane. But another part of me, a part one had kept carefully locked away, was stirring. It was the part that had dog-eared pages in National Geographic as a kid, the part that secretly loved the smell of rain on hot asphalt because it promised change, the part that felt a pang of something akin to grief every time I saw a plane flying overhead, bound for somewhere unknown. He stopped pacing and stood in front of me again. I'm not asking you to give up on our future, Sarah. I'm asking you to help me build a better one. A bigger one. One with stories we can't even imagine yet. He reached out and took my hands. His were warm, solid. This isn't a rejection of our life. It's an expansion of it. Tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of sheer, overwhelming cognitive dissonance. The man I loved, the most stable person I knew, was asking me to jump off a cliff with him into a roaring, unpredictable ocean. What about our jobs? I asked weakly. We quit. We find new ones when we get back. Or we don't. Maybe we find a new way to live altogether. Our families. They'll think we've lost our minds. They'll worry, he conceded. But they'll also be secretly jealous. And they'll be there when we get back. He looked at me, his expression softening into something vulnerable, raw. Sarah, I love you. And I don't want to wake up at 45 and realize that the best stories we have are about our lawn fertilizer or a successful quarterly report. I want to have stories about anchoring in a secluded bay under a sky full of stars you can't see from the city. I want to struggle through a storm with you and come out the other side, stronger. I want to get lost in a foreign market and find our way back, together. He squeezed my hands. So, that's my question. It's not the one you were probably expecting. It's bigger. It's scarier. But I think it's ours. Will you do it? Will you leave all this beige behind and sail around the world with me? The question hung in the air between us, immense and impossible. I looked at his face, at the hope and terror mirrored there. He was betting everything on me. On us. He was asking me to trade a paved path for an uncharted ocean. Every sensible bone in my body, every neuron fired by a lifetime of playing it safe, told me to say no. To gently talk him down from this ludicrous dream, to remind him of the sensible, good life we had already built. To get back on plan. But then I looked inward, at that locked-away part of me. And I saw it, not as a small, hidden thing, but as a potential supernova. I saw images, not from travel brochures, but from a life unlived, the two of us, tanned and tired, laughing as we fumbled with docking lines. Swimming in bioluminescent water, sharing a bottle of cheap wine on a deck as the sun set over a sea we had crossed ourselves. The fear was still there, a cold, hard knot in my stomach. But it was now tangled up with something else, something bright and fierce and desperately hungry. It was the thrill of the utterly unknown. I took a shuddering breath, the kind that comes before a leap. My voice, when it came, was quiet but clear, without a single tremor of doubt. Yes. The word was so simple, yet it felt like it cracked my world in two. The before, and the after. Mark's face exploded into a grin of pure, unadulterated joy. He swept me up in a hug that lifted me off my feet, spinning me around in my beige living room. Really? You mean it? I mean it, I laughed, the sound giddy and strange to my own ears. Let's do it. Let's buy a boat and get the hell out of here. What followed was a whirlwind that made the previous 3 years of our relationship look like a still photograph. Yes, was just the first domino to fall in a long, chaotic, and exhilarating line. Telling our parents was its own special kind of drama. My mother, a practical woman who measured success in square footage and job security, stared at me as if I'd announced I was joining a cult. A boat? Sarah, you can't even swim that well. What about pirates? Hurricanes? Vitamin C deficiency? My father, quieter, just looked worried, eventually pulling me aside to ask, is this because you're unhappy? Did Mark pressure you into this? Mark's family was slightly more receptive, his father, a former Marine, slapping him on the back and calling it a hell of an adventure, though his mother's smile was tight with anxiety. We gave our notices at work. The reactions were a mix of bewildered envy and outright pity. My boss sat me down and offered me a sabbatical instead, convinced I was having a quarter-life crisis. I thanked him but declined. A clean break was necessary. This wasn't a vacation, it was a migration. Then came the real work. We enrolled in a grueling, month-long liveaboard sailing course in San Diego. The first time we had to dock a 40-foot sloop in a crosswind, I was certain we were going to cause thousands of dollars in damage. I learned the difference between a sheet and a halyard, how to read a nautical chart, and the terrifying art of heaving to in heavy weather. Mark, the engineer, thrived on the technical aspects. The diesel engine became his new best friend and worst enemy. We fought. Oh, how we fought. Stress-fueled arguments over anchor rode and the proper way to coil a line. We learned each other's breaking points under pressure, and it wasn't always pretty. But with every challenge we overcame together, the dream began to feel less like a fantasy and more like a difficult, but achievable, project. The purge was cathartic. We sold Mark's condo, my car, and about 80% of our belongings. It was shocking how little we truly needed. The things we once cherished, the expensive furniture, the designer clothes, the collection of vintage vinyl, suddenly seemed like heavy anchors themselves. We kept a few small boxes of sentimental items in my parents' attic, but everything else was converted into cash, our cruising kitty. And then, there she was. We found her in a boatyard in Florida. Wanderlust, a 1984 Tiana 37, a blue water cutter known for its seaworthiness. She was old, with teak decks that needed oiling and sails that were slightly faded, but her hull was solid, and her spirit was undeniable. Standing on her deck for the first time, smelling the mix of salt, teak, and fiberglass, it finally became real. This wasn't just Mark's dream anymore. It was ours. This was going to be our home. The next 6 months were a blur of boat projects. We installed solar panels, a water maker, and a new autopilot. I learned to sew canvas for a new dinghy cover. Mark spent weeks rewiring the entire electrical system. We stocked lockers with enough canned goods and pasta to survive a siege. We pored over weather guides and pilot charts, planning a loose route, down the Intracoastal Waterway, then across the Gulf Stream to the Bahamas. The day we cast off the lines from our slip in Fort Lauderdale was the most terrifying and triumphant moment of my life. Our families were on the dock, waving, their faces a mosaic of love, fear, and pride. My mother was crying. My father gave me a firm, silent nod. Mark's hand was on the tiller, his knuckles white, but his smile was radiant. As we motored out of the calm, manicured channel and into the rolling swells of the open Atlantic, the fear that had been my constant companion for a year suddenly vanished, replaced by a profound and startling sense of rightness. The horizon was endless. The wind filled our sails with a powerful snap, and Wanderlust leaned into it, surging forward with a purpose that felt alive. Mark looked at me, his face sprayed with saltwater, and shouted over the wind, "You okay?" I wasn't just okay, I was more myself than I had ever been. The beige was gone, washed away in a vast, brilliant blue. I grinned back, a wild, free feeling I hadn't known I was capable of. I'm perfect. The first few weeks were a steep learning curve. I was seasick for 2 solid days after our first overnight passage. We misread the tide charts and ran aground on a sandbar in the Bahamas, spending a humiliating but hilarious 6 hours waiting for the water to return. We discovered leaks we didn't know we had during a squall and spent a frantic hour with every pot and pan we owned strategically placed around the cabin. But the hardships were eclipsed 1,000 times over by the magic. The magic of swimming in water so clear we could see starfish on the bottom 60 feet below. The magic of dropping anchor in a deserted cove, the only light coming from the moon and the bioluminescence sparkling around our hull. The magic of catching a mahi-mahi and eating it for dinner an hour later. The magic of meeting other cruisers, a wonderfully eclectic tribe of escapees and dreamers, and sharing sundowners and stories on each other's boats. We learned to read the sky, to feel the shifts in the wind, to trust our vessel and, more importantly, to trust each other in ways we never had to on land. The man I knew as a meticulous planner learned to improvise when the weather didn't care about his schedule. The woman I was, who craved stability, discovered a deep well of resilience when a pump failed or a storm blew in. One evening, about 8 months into our journey, we were anchored off a tiny, remote island in the Grenadines. The sky was a firework display of stars, undimmed by any light pollution. We were sitting in the cockpit, sharing a bar of chocolate, listening to the gentle lapping of water against the hull. Mark was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You know, back in your apartment that night, when I asked you, I was so scared. I was sure you were going to say no." I leaned my head against his shoulder. I was sure I was going to say no, too. It was the craziest thing anyone had ever asked me. He turned to look at me, his face illuminated by the starlight. "Do you ever regret it?" I thought about the life we'd left behind. The promotions we'd passed up, the house we hadn't bought, the predictable future we had traded for this unpredictable present. I thought about the fear, the exhaustion, the moments of sheer panic. And then I looked around me, at the silhouette of palm trees on the shore, at the Milky Way stretching above us, at the sturdy little boat that had become our world. Not for a single second, I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. This is the best yes I have ever said." He asked me something I never imagined, something that shattered the comfortable future I had always seen for myself. And I said yes. And that one word, that leap of faith into the terrifying and the glorious unknown, didn't just change my address. It changed who I was. It taught me that the greatest adventures aren't just about the places you go, but about the person you become on the way. And it all started with a question, on an ordinary Tuesday, that turned my beige world into a universe of color.